am excited to bring on, I teased this a few weeks ago. We haven't talked to him in a little while. He's been on the show before. My buddy, Casey Armstrong.
Whoa!
Casey, what's up, buddy?
Hey, what's going on, Carl? I got to tell you that Corey Feldman is as delusional as he is short.
Yeah, he's not a tall man, is he?
He has midget hands.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hey. I'm doing well. You know producer Chris and Trucker Andy, right?
Yeah, no doubt. These guys are awesome. I'm a big fan.
So the reason why Casey's on the show, and you made a video recently that was discovered in the Dabbleverse, where you finally decided, you're like, you know what? Stuttering John is not a good friend. He's an asshole. And I'm really enjoying all of this content. And you called it out. You talked about who are these podcasts, Uncle Rico, Steel Toe, Radio Gunk, Anthony Cumia, Chrissy Mayer. Like you put it out there. Like, I'm enjoying all of this content.
I love all of them.
Yeah, about Stuttering John. And now you've been very quiet about this, and you finally decided, you know what? I worked with this guy for many years. You were a producer on the Howard Stern Show for many years, while the call screener John Melendez was there. And I loved what you put out as a video, and I wanted to talk to you about it because John loves to brag about all of his accomplishments, as we know, and he loves to talk about how he was a writer on the Howard Stern Show.
Yeah.
And who would know better about what John actually contributed than Casey Armstrong to the Howard Stern Show? So talk to me about that lie that John was a writer.
Okay, all right. So Carl, it's like exactly what you said. It is I'm enjoying it so much that I see all the things that he says about me. And enough of that. Let me just answer your question. He had 2 jobs, right? One was to sit, and when people would call in, he would say, "What do you want to talk to Howard about?" Put them on hold, and right up on the screen, line 17, Joe wants to talk about Woodstock 99, something like that, going way back. I mean, it's just, 25 years ago or whatever. And Howard would see that in his console. So every once in a while, John would write something up there, and like half the time, Howard would get mad. Why is John writing me notes? But on a slim chance he got one of his things in or something like that, his hands would go up. You would think that, somebody sort of touched that. I wrote that. I did that. But it was frequent. It was infrequent, and it never really happened. So to be a writer on the show, that's not a accurate description of what he did.
The way you just described that is important to point out because we've been reading John's book or listening to his audio book, and we've obviously listened to a lot of his content on his show. And according to John, it was his job to not only be the call screener, but to write those jokes to Howard and to feed Howard these lines that were going to crush and kill, and how often that happened, that he considered himself a writer on that. And you're telling me that Howard told him not to do that.
Right. He got in trouble a lot. And it was so funny because all the interns are in the same room, and, Will's there, and Jason, and I'm at my computer. Gary's in his little cubicle thing there. And then when Howard would start yelling at John just had this defeated look on his face, like, not what he wants you to see, because John is very consumed with how he appears, especially to interns who he'll never speak to again in 2 months.
Right. Yeah. Now, you made an observation, and I don't want to just rehash everything that was in your video. People should check that out. What's your YouTube channel, Casey?
Oh, thanks, buddy. It's just Casey Armstrong, and I just started a YouTube channel, so if you give me one of those subscribes, I really appreciate it.
Yes. So people should check out that video and subscribe to Casey's channel, because you talked about the fact that when John was participating in writing the questions for celebrities, he had fewer of his questions make it to the final cut than the interns on the show.
And Carl, that's if he attempted to write questions. Most of the time, he didn't even try. He was never on Lotus Notes, and that's how everyone, even the interns, were on that to contribute to the show. But John thought his contribution was to show up 5 minutes late, have an intern fill in for him, getting calls up on the computer, and telling on somebody or tattling. Scott went to the bathroom and didn't wash his hands, and go and tell Howard if there was a time during a commercial or something like that. But that was his way of producing. Come on, Carl. That's what a producer does.
Well,
they don't stay till 3 o'clock. They don't call publicists. They don't do a cut tape. I remember one time, this is great, Carl, just to stick it up his ass, he's just standing there, me and Gary, during a commercial, or telling Howard or asking him if he wants to go this way or that way. And I had a reel. This was back when we used reels.
Yep.
And just to stick it up his ass, I go, hey, I got to go over this one more thing. John, can you rack this reel up on reel 2 and give it to him? And he's just standing there. He didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So he just goes over there and just kind of looks at it, and I made up some excuse or something like that. But he didn't know anything that a producer does. Like, he didn't know what, this is way back, a cart was, a Bernoulli disc, like a reel-to-reel, how to cut tape. I mean, we were all taught how to do this to be a producer at the biggest show ever. You would, if you didn't know it, you would ask someone and you would learn.
I was just going to say, like, you'd want to learn those things. If somebody said, "Hey, can you set this up for us?" and you haven't done that before, be like, "Oh, show me how." I'd love to be able to do that for you. But John, with his stupid ego, thinking that he's the star of the show, thinks he's above all of that, and that's why KC was a producer and had the role that he did on the show, and why John was the phone screener.
Yeah, and that's why Hale Sparks has to come to your house and set up your fucking podcast.
To this day.
You have no idea what the fuck you're doing.
Oh, I have to ask you this, too, because this was kind of funny, one of the things that you said. So you just brought this up a second ago about how, like, he would get an intern to fill in for him screening phone calls, and he would go take a shit for, like, an hour in the bathroom.
Yeah. That's totally true.
Of course it is. Shitting at work, am I right, people? It's the worst. The worst thing you can do.
But that just shows you. I mean, there was never a problem. Like, oh my God, what are we going to do? John's not here. The part of the team isn't here. No, you just get an intern who's been here for 2 weeks to ask people what they want to talk to Howard about. Pretty simple.
The linchpin of the show is taking a shit for an hour. How do we go on?
Mello's Larry Green is on line 7? Oh, I guess we figured it out. All right, well, there you go. Wasn't that difficult after
Carl,
all.
that was the thing, too. Like, because those commercial breaks were like 7 to 9 minutes back in the day there, even longer. And Gary was number one, because I worked for Gary. But so Gary would go over what he's got going on. He's got a bit or whatever. And then it was my turn. So I'd go over, like, I'd pull some tape from comedians, or I had an idea for a bit or something, whatever it was. And then sometimes there'd be a couple of seconds left, and John would just be sitting there, just standing back there, because he had no idea what we were doing.
Right.
He had no contribution to it at all, unless he was going to tell on somebody. But it'd be so funny. Right before the commercial, and after me and Gary did our thing, Gary would be like, "Why are you here?" And then John would be like, "Jeff the Drunk is on line 3."
So John was on the Stern Show for 16 years. He started as an intern. I believe screening phone calls was one of the first jobs they gave him, if I'm not mistaken, because there was a small crew back then. So,
and Carl, he even said that that's how he would produce the show, with the calls that came in.
Right.
Or if they give him some information that he could use in his personal life.
That's not producing a show. That's screening phone calls. It's very different. Yeah. I know. I like that he pretends now that he discovered Jeff the Drunk. He likes to talk about all these people like that he's responsible for. It's like, no, Jeff the Drunk called into the Howard Stern Show. You're just the guy who said hello.
Yeah.
Stern Show.
He's calling to talk to Howard.
Yeah, you didn't discover it. If someone calls you because you work at a show, you didn't discover them. That's how that works at all, you moron.
Yeah, and he would do what Howard referred to as the John Show in the office, where he would make up weird voices when people would call in, "What would you like to talk to Howard about?" Something like that. So he'd try and get the interns to laugh at him doing the John Show, as Howard said. He goes, "I don't need that. I need you to answer the phone. I don't need you to, put on the show for the interns, And that was a bone of contention. The John Show that went on. He would never do it if Gary was in his office. He would just do it if he knew the coast was clear. If Gary was on air, then John could be doing the John show and getting the accolades from
I remember Howard dressing him down and on air saying, John, you're doing the John show out in the hall. You got to stop it. You're distracting everybody. They have work to do. Do your work. And what's interesting about that, I don't know if you saw this, but John had a writer out from The Tonight Show. It was his coworker. He had him on Beer on the Balcony. And that coworker lost his job, unfortunately, after a year. But when they brought him in to tell him they had to let him go, they're like, what we like about you is that you're quiet and you do your work. You're not one of these guys who's out in the hall running your own show and trying to be the center of attention. And John goes, that was me. It's like, yeah. Did you hear what he just said? The bosses hated that. They appreciated this guy didn't do that. John never understood, even though Howard told him not to do it, and Gary hated it, and Leno hated it. He never figured it out. It's like, this isn't your show, asshole. You just work here.
Totally, Carl. And that is, if you watch, John's ego is, it comes out, it shines when he goes in the studio because he can say anything he wants to anybody.
Right.
Tom, Gary called me a pussy. I don't know how we got through that because, I mean, my old man was a gym teacher. If somebody calls you a pussy, I mean, I wasn't used to that, but I took it. And during a break, he thought everything was cool, and he came in. I think they have that on the E-show where they show it, like he thinks that we're okay after he just called another man a pussy. And I'm so glad that I think it was Ronnie who talked me down because I'm like, I'm gonna fuck this guy up. I mean, when this is over. But he's like, yeah, you're gonna lose your job, and I would leave that to my own devices to ruin that and lose my job in my own way years later.
Right. And I'll say this for you, Casey, is you're a pretty big guy, especially back then. And the last thing I'd be calling you is a pussy if I were Stuttering John Melendez.
No, but it was that time on the air. He was like, come on, what are you going to do? And that goes to a different level. You can goof on somebody. That's what the show's about. And you should be in feel free and safe in an atmosphere where nobody's going to physically attack you. But it's a difference between goofing on somebody and saying, come on, right. What are you going to do? You're a pussy. Yeah. That I didn't take well, but I got through it, Carl.
Well, you pointed out something else, and hold on to your thought for a second there, that, he would tattle on everyone. That was one of his jobs there. And Scott Salem, like, oh, he didn't wash his hands. Now he's got to yell or run and tell Howard that. Are you surprised at how John pretends that him and Scott are best buds now? Because I'm sure you've seen this thing where he stays with Scott down in Florida, and they're on the shows together, and they're talking like they're old time pals. Like they hated each other, especially Scott hated John.
Yeah, he did. And Carl, John has one type of relationship, and that's a transactional relationship. Yes. It's what can you do for me, and if you can't, I won't even acknowledge you. I might not even look at you. But if you could do something for me, we can be friends. And or if you can support my ego, where I talk about myself, and you can say, "Oh yeah, John, you were the best. You did so much, and you were ahead of your time, and you were a big celebrity." Like I saw something when you guys just put out. By the way, it's so entertaining. You guys do such a great job. You and your team.
Thank you.
Everybody that we talked about before, Cumia, oh my God, he is genius. Did you see when he gave his rebuttal to John? I think it's like, it was like an hour. And
I've watched it thrice. I mean, I've watched it.
It's like a song you like, Carl. You keep playing
it. Yeah. No, I've watched that a bunch of times. It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah. And we got to talk about one time is that my friend Mike went to that infamous show where John comes in blazing, where he's, I'm used to the Tonight Show. You want $20 for beer or something like that. Remember that one I'm talking about? You guys did a great one.
Of course, yeah. That was the Anthony and Artie show. That was when John went on with Anthony and Artie. Artie was 20 minutes late, and John got destroyed for 60 minutes and then took his ball and went home.
Did you know that Mike drove in there and was there for that whole thing? So that's somebody that
I've communicated with Mike behind the scenes. Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. That guy's got some stories to tell.
And you know how it started, Carl? It started when Mike drove from Long Island, picked him and his brother up, I think, drove into the city, and when they get to Cumia's place, John goes, I'm going to get out. You go out and find parking.
Yeah.
Let him go out. And it's like he was a chauffeur to this guy who was supposed to be his friend.
Oh, he treated him like shit the whole weekend. Yeah.
Transactional relationship.
Yep. Well, that was the I don't know if it was the same weekend or not, but that was the famous poker game where he made him go get money for John so he could buy back in. You got to go to the
Carl,
ATM and get some money.
If you ever play cards with them again, I will never hang out with you.
Yeah, I don't blame you, as you should. Andy, did you get a question?
Oh, no, I was just going to bring up the fact that when he was trying to egg you into just like calling you a pussy.
Yeah.
It just seemed like he was trying to manufacture one of those meltdowns, like Fred flipping out, or one of the cast members losing it.
Right.
And you didn't bite, and you didn't give him what he wants. So that's to your credit, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. But Andy, yeah, you're right, man. That's exactly what he was trying to do, and he was good at it. To press buttons, there's a place for that, and that's good. But when you start attacking a man, if you're a man and you attack another man, and you raise to that level, that that could have went a different way. But yeah, that's it. And you can see that where he was on the air, and it was his time to get back at the people who were above him.
Yeah.
Right.
He could say what he wanted.
There's
just
so
joking.
many.
Come on.
There's so many examples of that, and I'll say this: I tried to get Casey to Rochester for Debunking. It would have been fucking awesome.
That would have been.
That was going to be my big surprise to have Casey come out and spill the beans. But there were so many videos that we played. There were so many videos we put on that episode. We had Anthony and Missy, and we were chatting about him on the Howard Stern show. And so many times when the programming director's in there and John's just like firing off on all these people, when he would never say any of these things to people if he wasn't on the air, obviously.
Right. That was his cover. That's
no authority.
Why, he loved to tell on people, and sometimes it came out great. But you're right. He'd never say stuff like that off the air. And the one thing that I wanted to tell you, which I don't know if you know, but the biggest grifter thing that he ever did was, I told you about this thing at Lotus Notes where there was a group called Group, and that was everybody. That was even interns. They could see everything, right?
Yeah.
And then below that were like the writers and inner kind of people who actually did the production and stuff like that. So John hated it because he wasn't part of that. And that's probably why he didn't do Lotus Notes at all, because if I'm not going to be part of that, see, he wouldn't even get to see what the schedule was because he had nothing to do with it. We would print it out in the morning and give him one. So, hey, 7:30, you got to pick up a phone call from whatever. But as soon as he saw that, he would jockey for position when a comedian came in so he could go bother them to get them on his Stuttering John and Friends. And this is the most embarrassing and insulting things that you could do to someone who is a professional comedian. You got a guy who is going to take probably 3/4 of the money, put you up on stage for half the time. He'll have two people. They'll both do 35, 40 or whatever. John does 5 minutes and a beer guzzling at the end of the show, and is going to take home 2 times that you will. I'm talking about, somebody like Artie or a Nick DiPaolo or someone who is Michael Jordan of stand-up comedy, and John would just wait to see a copy of the schedule or try and sneak a copy so he could see what people were coming in because he had nothing to do with booking it. Is that gross?
Are you sure he just didn't know how to use Lotus Notes?
I think that's very... He never bothered to learn, for sure.
Yeah.
But it's funny you bring that up, Casey, because we've been documenting this on our Patreon. If you listen, we have another Patreon episode coming up in a couple of weeks of another installment of Easy for You to Say. And one of the things that John talks about in his book, and he brags about it, is how much money he would pay Nick DiPaolo or Jim Florentine or Modi or Jim Norton, any of these guys that was on this Stuttering John and Friends tour. And he brags about how he would take most of the money and did very little of the work. Because he would go out there, do 7 minutes. He wasn't a stand-up. He admits that in his book. He wasn't good at it back then. And could you imagine Casey. You have a Nick DiPaolo who's a pro, who's got an act, a name for himself, everything going on. He's just like, yeah, I'd love to be on the Stuttering John and Friends tour. There's going to be all these Howard Stern fans. It's going to be great. And then years later, John's writing in his book, yeah, and Nick DiPaolo was worth like, I don't know, $1,500 a weekend. Meanwhile, I took 20 grand. You're like, what the fuck?
Put that number out there too. Oh, it's so insulting, and it bothers me too, because at the same time, like I guess we were starting to do stand up at the same time, and I went to the New York Comedy Club, and I sucked at it, but I wanted to get better, so at night I would go do it. You know, John didn't put the time in, because you suck for the first 5-6 years or whatever.
Sure.
And that's where I met Florentine and I met Levy, and I brought them, and we used to go every weekend. And you would learn from people who knew how to do it, not from an ego where you think that you are equal to these people who have surpassed you and are professionals at what they do. It's like saying to a plumber, hey, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Let me use my hand. And it's ridiculous.
I feel like it's akin to like being a show promoter and like booking it. And this is the talent, and you're doling in this amount out. It would be like if Sharon Osbourne was going around saying, "Oh, I opened for Motley Crue and Ozzy."
Right.
That's just like
you're right.
Yeah, you were just there. You got to these guys to agree to do something, and then you underpaid them and kept too much of the money.
It'd be like if Sharon Osbourne wrote a book talking about how she takes credit for Iron Maiden's success. Well, I did put them on Ozfest in 2007. You're like, no, that has nothing to do with any of this, but that's what Stuttering John, that's how he thinks about himself.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you say he never put in the work, because you can tell by the way he writes his book and talks about these tours that he would go up, he would do a stupid thing, show his video or whatever, and then bring the other guys on to do all the work. And he just enjoyed all the accolades. And the balls on this guy to say that Artie Lang was a hack. He literally wrote in there that Artie's act was not good and he wasn't funny.
You're one of the biggest hacks I know.
Yeah, that's what he said about Artie
He doesn't
Lang.
know how to craft a joke, I guess.
Yeah, it's fucking insane for this guy to be doing shows with Artie Lang. He's killing it. He's killing the room. He's selling out all the places they're playing. He's like, this guy's not even good at comedy. Like, what?
Oh, you have no idea what a gift that was. If Artie asked you out of the kindness of his heart, he did it because we were friends. I got to do a bunch of gigs with him, and there were people. He would sell out 2-3 shows, and when I was in a group called Murderers Rose with Levy, Florentine, Sexton, Jimmy Graham, and Scott Demo. We
Are you saying you discovered Bob Levy?
Well, yeah, actually.
That's the title of this episode.
I met him at a comedy club.
Nice.
Jim introduced me to him. But anyway, my point in that was that, Levy handled the money. Levy handled the gigs. I don't know anything about that. I can just promote it on the show, and that's why I'm on there.
Right.
I'm not, I'm not some blue chip prospect. And then you learn. They took me on the road, and you get to learn stuff. But right away, John thought that he was on that level, which is just so delusional, and it's really crazy. Don't you think?
Yeah, he's drafting off the popularity of Howard.
Well,
and thinking that he's earned that.
The word that Casey just used is perfect. Instead of Stuttering John, he doesn't stutter anymore. Delusional John is the perfect name. Like, he's a whackpacker now. It's Delusional John. What does he think he accomplished this time? Hey, Delusional John, tell us about how you were the head writer for The Tonight Show.
Oh, Carl, you got to hear Shuli talk. I don't know if you've heard, but Shuli tells this awesome story about how John left his tape, which was half his act, before he came away. He left it in a hotel room in Vegas. Yeah. And do you know this story?
Oh yeah. No, Shuli's told this on the show before. Because it was before Shuli, like, he was a caller to the show, but he wasn't employed by them at all. And he lived in Vegas, and he busted his ass to get this tape out of the room, and John left it behind and get it back to John. And he could have thrown John under the bus because John was not supposed to be showing any Howard Stern material on these shows.
Howard Stern was not supposed to be even in the booking, not on the marquee, not anything. You had to say K-Rock, you had to, you couldn't use his name. But after everything, Carl, the magic phrase was, "After all I've done for you."
That is John's catchphrase right there. After all I've done for you. Like, and Shuley's even saying, she's like, "What did you do for me? You put me on hold? What do you mean?"
You see, I always try and help people. Because what else are we here for?
It's great.
Yeah, of course. Of course he does.
Casey, I want to ask you, so obviously you guys work together on the Stern Show, and I love that you're coming out and explaining what John's actual role was and everything like that. But what was your experience after he left? And he went to the Tonight Show, and very quickly he was on the pay no mind list from the Howard Stern Show because there was the fight between Howard and Leno. But how did you guys reconnect down the road? Did he reach out to you to do his podcast, or did you have other interactions outside of that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Carl. If you want to know what changed at the show, nothing. Will just moved over a seat, and besides doing the great work that Will does, booking guests, doing research, pre-interviews, he just answered the phone. And there was no difference when John wasn't there because, like I said, he never did anything. I mean, if you worked there and you were a producer there, you got there at like 5:30. I had to get Howard. I had to wait for him. So I got there a little bit earlier, and then whatever had to happen. And 6 o'clock, he was on the air, right? John would get there running as fast as he could. No calls are up. Howard wanted calls up at 6 o'clock if he wanted to right away go to the phones.
Yep.
And a lot of times we'd have an intern or I think Benji was there before he went into the studio. But anyway, after the show, as soon as Robin would end the news, John was gone, trying to grub lunch from somebody, and then he'd go home. So he had the other job he had was doing fan mail. He'd get an intern, and he'd read 2 lines of it. That goes in the fan bin. That goes in the wanting to come on the show bin or whatever. And that took about 5 minutes of his time.
Yes.
That's all he did, Carl.
So Casey has brought this up. John only had really 2 jobs. Now, for a while there, he was the stunt boy and he was interviewing celebrities, but he became so well known that he couldn't do that anymore. So they had to get different guys to interview the celebrities. So John's only jobs at the end of his run on the Howard Stern Show were to answer the phone calls and to look at the mail. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
And that's it. And to tell on people. Which,
well, right. Yeah, of course. Try to get on the air as much as possible, of course. Yeah.
And getting whatever you can get out of it and, bothering the comedians that were sitting in for the news to see if they were big enough.
Yeah.
And they were going to draw people to his Stuttering John and Friends.
Or trying to prank Grillo and failing miserably at it. We've never played that tape before on this show, but that might be fun to look at some point. When he tried to prank Grillo because
the dollar bill thing.
He made Grillo think that he was up for like this acting role. He had to audition for this acting role.
Okay.
And he didn't tell anyone on the show that he was pranking Grillo, and he just came in with the tapes like, "Oh, check this out. This is great." So they're like, "Okay, cool. Let's see what you got." And then it was so bad that I was like, John, you're not allowed to do this anymore. Yeah. If you want to do a prank on someone, you got to get Fred involved and Jackie. You got to get the comedians involved because you're not funny. Right. This is not good at all. I'm giving away the punchline, but I mean, it's still worth checking out.
I think we'll still enjoy it.
Carl, this is what the problem was. Is like on Lotus Notes, if you were a part of Lotus Notes or if you even were in group, I would see it and I could forward it to the guys one with Howard and Jackie and Rod. And if Howard thought it was a good idea in his red pen, he would say, bring up in the meeting or something like that. Yeah. But John was too good for that. He didn't even participate in the way that we were supposed to contribute to the show. It's just that huge ego. And,
I think he was afraid of rejection, to be honest with you. I don't think he wanted to put his ideas out there because Howard would just be like, "That's a terrible idea, John." Moving on.
Right.
So anyway, just to get back, though, to that question, I'm just curious, as far as your relationship with John after he left the show and then later after you left the show, did you guys keep in contact, or was it actually just like 5 or 6 years ago he reached out, "Hey, will you come on my show and talk about how it's
sad?" I think that's kind of the way it went.
Okay.
I was in California for like 10 years, and I don't know if he was out at the same time, but we never got together out there. I would say we crossed paths again when our books came out, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, but mine mentioned Howard one time in 2 books. It was nothing about the Howard Stern show. That's 25 years ago.
I have to give you a lot of credit, Casey, because you do not live in the past. You've avoided talking about this, and you finally went, everyone's talking about John. I got to get in on this shit. It's too much fun.
And that too, and then, but then calling me a liar, basically, I don't like that.
Right.
That's something where you draw the line where I knew what he was doing, but my friend Autumn, who worked with me and did John's website, and like I said, never got paid, she would get mad because she read the book, and he would set me up to lie, saying the homeless game that I created as an intern, which kind of got my foot in the door, or maybe I was working there, I don't know, it's so long ago. But I'm the one that stole jaywalking, and he put it in a book. So basically, you can call me whatever you want, and if you think I suck, that's fine. But don't call me a liar, and don't put my word up for interpretation, because it is what it is, and that's one thing that I don't fare well with. If you can understand that,
sure. Especially when a liar calls you a liar. Yeah. That's even worse.
That's even worse. That's fucked up. So you brought up something that just reminded me. There is a huge scoop from my boy Muttering Jay on Twitter.
I got one too, but you go first.
Okay, good. Hold on to that thought. Muttering Jay hasn't been wrong yet.
Right.
And he reports a lot of information. Apparently, we all know the great Michael Popak did his work for John pro bono when they were trying to sue SiriusXM. Not trying to.
But he's so rich, though. Why does every lawyer give him pro bono?
Wait, say that again?
But he's so rich and he's got so much money.
Right. Why he doesn't even need it.
Every lawyer do pro bono?
I don't know. It's so weird.
They do that for poor people.
So listen to this, though. So Michael Popak suing SiriusXM. He did it for the publicity, but maybe also he thought they're just going to settle and make it easy for him or something. But it actually turned into an actual thing, and it took a lot of time, and Michael Popak has complained about this. So apparently, Michael Popak invoiced John for some incidentals. Now, you can do the work pro bono, and you're like, okay, this is my firm. I'm going to make sure that the time that my people spend on this, I'm not going to charge you for. Very nice thing to do. But there's going to be out-of-pocket costs that are hard costs. That part of pro bono. I've worked at agencies. I've owned an agency. I know how this all works. It's like, all right, we're going to do this for free for our time, but any out-of-pocket expenses, we need you to reimburse. John has blocked Michael Popak, blocked his number, blocked his email. He refuses to pay him or even acknowledge that he owes him money.
What a scumbag.
He's a fucking scumbag. What's your story?
But his credit's already fucked. It's not like his credit score
I won't align myself with a loser.
You want money? Try winning the case.
Think about the balls on that, guys. I mean, the balls. Somebody's going to help you for free, and you're going to turn around and screw them over. That sucks. Now, we're not talking about
a lot of money too, Casey. We're not talking about, we're talking about an amount of money that anyone would be like, all right, that's reasonable. Here you go. All right, what do you got?
Well, going through some of, YouTube gives you, they recommend stuff that if you like, who are these podcasts, they're going to hook you up with the Uncle Rico and stuff like that. So you discover new stuff. There was a video, I'm not sure if it's still up. And I want to know if you guys know anything about it. It's John, so it's not that he didn't went out there. He broadcast the fact that there was something that went on with him and his ex-wife, and he mentioned, he's like, well, we were young then, and it was Howard and Beth. I'm not making this up. It's a YouTube video implying that there was some chicanery, some nonsense, some tomfoolery going on with couples.
Wait, what?
I have not heard this. This is news to me. Are you talking about a wife swap situation? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes. And it's John's voice, so it's not something that I'm making up. Or
maybe it's a deep fake.
I didn't want to talk about it because my ex-wife. I did it not to talk about it because of her. But I wondered if that was a thing that, because I'm learning a lot of this stuff now. Was that a thing?
Well, you just made it a thing.
It's on the internet, and I was just,
sure
watching
is.
it. It's a short video. It's John talking. So
Guys,
I'm not putting something out there.
I'm asking the Dabbleverse to look for that. I haven't been checking the subreddit in a while.
Go.
So, yeah. if that's a thing.
Dabble's videos and their photoshops. Such a creative bunch of people over there.
Oh, I know.
You lucked out. You got great people around.
Well, you know what it is? John's inability to be funny or entertaining in any single way has attracted just the opposite to him. It really is.
Has united so many.
It really is amazing. Boom! Yeah. But, Casey, I've not heard of that, and maybe it's a deep fake or something. People have to let me know if they can find it. I'd love to hear that, because I just feel like if John fucked Beth O, he would never shut up about it. Yeah. It just seems like something he'd be bragging about every day. Like, he's in algebra class, and he's going, all right, so we're going to do 17 divided by 6. Yeah. Did I ever tell you I fucked Howard Stern's wife?
Well, and Carl, I'm sorry, go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say the wives in that scenario are the real losers.
Yeah.
Well, in the video, it just says that he's not talking about it because he's thinking of his ex-wife. He doesn't say that he slept with anybody, but what the implication is that there was some nonsense and some silliness that happened a long time ago when they were young. And I wanted to know what it was, because I don't know a lot of these things,
I like that you're saying tomfoolery and nonsense and silliness. These are great words.
There was some hand holding.
This is a radio pro right here, fellas. You got to figure out different words to use.
Somebody was making time with Howard's best girl.
That's great. Well, Casey, aside from the YouTube channel, which is what, Casey Armstrong?
Yeah, just Casey Armstrong, and it's my picture. So
yep.
That's the one I'm looking to get the subscriptions on.
The letters KC Armstrong on YouTube. Anything else that you're promoting right now? Your radio show, your book?
Yeah, I'm starting writing my third book now, and WMAPradio.com. I just had to leave the studio, and I'm in the process of moving the first time in 6 years. I'm off the air for this week.
Okay.
And moving into a new building, but we'll be back up on Monday doing WMAP radio and all that stuff. But I want to thank you guys so much. I want to thank everybody for welcoming me and having me on. And anytime, buddy.
Casey, let's definitely do this again sooner than later. You and I actually, and this was Casey's idea, we did a whole breakdown of Paris Hilton's documentary.
I remember that. It was great.
It's up on YouTube. It was one of the very first video versions of Who Are These Podcasts we ever did. Now we do it a couple times a week. But back then, I didn't know how to do it. And Casey was like, no, we got to break this down. And it's so much fun. Really, I had a blast doing that. But it's great that you're part of the Dabbleverse now. And I appreciate you hopping on board to let us know about some behind the scenes Stuttering John shenanigans.
Anytime, man. And on that channel, I'm not gonna follow up and do a whole bunch of stuff there. I'm gonna do 4 videos just so I get it out. And the rest of the videos will be games, like with 3 questions, like who got makeup at the Vegas live shows. Was it Dominic, was it Fred, or John? And the question is, it was John in front of the whole crowd. He had to take Tony Covert over and said, put makeup on me so I look important to all these people. Like, just shit like that.
That's great.
So I'll do a couple games like that, and then I'll put John away, and we'll be even.
People like Stuttering John games.
No shit. I might have an announcement about that at some point soon, too.
A potato is going to steal that idea.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right, Casey, thanks, buddy. Good to talk to you again.
Thanks so much, guys. Talk to you soon.
One of these days, we're going to connect. We've been missing each other a few times, but one of these days.
We'll definitely do it, man. Our next live event, I'm there.
Right. Philadelphia, April 22nd.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm there.
All right, buddy.
All right,
cool. I'll talk to you soon.
Care.
Later.
Awesome.
The great Casey Armstrong, everybody.
Amazing.
I was going to, so he sent me that video before he posted it, and I was going to pull clips from it. And I'm like, I'll just have him on. We'll just talk about it. And then I think it was last week or earlier this week, it was discovered. They're like, has anyone seen this video of Casey calling out Stuttering John? Like, all right, well, the cat's out of the bag on that one. But God, if I could have gotten into Dabblecon, that would have been fucking awesome.
That would have been.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Who are these podcasts?